Since the mind can absorb only what the rear can endure, I will try to be brief. Sister, by the way, that neuter, that was a time-lapse joke. Did you see the rippling of the laughter as it proceeded? Yeah, it was terrific. I'm going to use that. It's great. Actually, since I'm here today, and I want to thank President Riaz, and I want to thank the program committee and Professor Neckers for inviting me to come to Toledo. Ironically, the Jamestown Rotary Club has its meetings at the Robert H. Jackson Center in Jamestown. So we see the process here ongoing every week, and they do a wonderful job, but I will report back for you. I also feel like my daughter works for the Detroit Tigers, so I feel like Joba Chamberlain here, coming in the eighth inning, trying to set up for the person you're having next week, which is Brenda Hollis. Brenda Hollis, who was the last chief prosecutor at the Sierra Leone trial. She'll be here, and she's a friend, and she's terrific. And she's a Bowling Green University grad, and she's been often at our Jackson Center activities, and it's just a thrill that you're going to have her next week. And hopefully by the end of my more remarks regarding the Robert Jackson Center, you'll have a chance to see how this all ties in. Dr. Neckers, brief story to kind of set the stage for the Robert H. Jackson Center and its connection to Toledo. Robert H. Jackson, as Doug mentioned, was born in 1892, graduated from local Bruceburg High School, and he then took a 13th degree year at Jamestown High School. He became the answer ultimately to the Jeopardy question, which was just on 2 weeks ago, named the only person who was the only person to be Attorney General, Solicitor General, and Justice of the Supreme Court in United States history, a guy from Jamestown, New York, who, as Doug indicated, never went to college and never graduated from law school, which made this rather unique. And, of course, the Nuremberg trial became very much part of that world. Well, anyways, Dr. Neckers, when we got started in the year 2001, and there is a little brochure on your tables, please take that with you, and it talks about the fact that we are the only institution in the United States honoring a Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Yes, there's a Brennan Center, yes, there's a Marshall Center, but they're all affiliated with organizations. Well, in the year 2001, we were created to advance the legacy of Justice Robert H. Jackson, and we started with programming. We started with programming of individuals who were part of Robert Jackson's world. They included people who were Nuremberg prosecutors with him, albeit in their 80s and 90s, but they came to Jamestown. People who were law clerks to Justice Jackson on the Supreme Court, again, albeit in their 80s and 90s. And I would always see in the audience when we conducted these interviews, of which we probably have about 1,000 of these interviews now, in place of various people, this white-haired guy named Doug Neckers. And Doug Neckers, I go, who is this guy? And he comes up finally after about the third program he shows up. He's from Clymer, New York, just up the road. It turns out his grandfather had as his bank attorney Robert Jackson. And then he started showing up, and then he did something really special. He invited me to come to Bowling Green to spend a day and introduce me to a variety of professors from the humanities to social studies to sciences, music, arts, you name it. And I had a great opportunity to tell the Robert H. Jackson story in his various components and find that Bowling Green was the first university to see where the possibilities existed for collaboration. It then led to us inviting professors and students to come to the Jackson Center, which is near Chautauqua Institution for those who have been there. And we had an event celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Nuremberg trial. And there they were. They had a chance to meet actual Nuremberg prosecutors. They had a chance to meet those folks who are currently prosecuting war criminals. The next thing, through Gary Hess, who's here today, among others, they created an environment where at Bowling Green, they had a 60th anniversary Nuremberg celebration here. I came, I spoke, I met with a variety of people, including the first chief prosecutor at the Sierra Leone Tribunal, the guy who prosecuted Charles Taylor, David Crane. That led to a conversation which led to the first of what is now 8 international humanitarian law dialogues in Jamestown, New York, where the only time once a year all the chief prosecutors of the international tribunals show up. This is Rwanda, Cambodia, Sierra Leone, International Criminal Court, Liberia. They come here because of a meeting that occurred here in Toledo. Subsequently, we had an event in Nuremberg, and Heinz Buhlmann and took some folks from Bowling Green to go there, and he became my interpreter when I interviewed people who were part of the Nuremberg trial from the German Defense Council. The next thing you know, we actually have events at Chautauqua which are encouraged by Gary Hess. And it goes on. In fact, WGTE has actually, as they're doing here right now, filmed several of our programs, and it's now on your local cable. So I'm thrilled. I feel like I'm coming back home because in many senses the Robert Jackson Center, which started in the year 2001, so we're really a work in progress, became the incubator of that came through activities that occurred here in the Bowling Green, Toledo area. So I thank you. I thank you very much from Jamestown, New York, and all the board of directors for all of that ongoing activity. In fact, you need to know that within your geographical distance is 4 people who are a part of the Nuremberg scene, folks who are involved in the security, folks who are involved as secretaries to the prosecutors. They all live here, and we've had a chance to interview them. So, again, thank you. A little bit about the Robert Jackson Center and what's motivated that. And maybe this is an object lesson. I'm an attorney in Jamestown, New York. That's my vocation. I learned that as an attorney that there was a Robert Jackson from our hometown. How nifty is that to say you have a justice of the Supreme Court in our hometown? But then I sort of asked around, even in our own area, about Robert H. Jackson. And what they would tell me is, yes, he was a justice of the Supreme Court, but not sure when. Yes, he had something to do with Nuremberg, but not sure what or during that time period. Yes, he died in the 50s sometime, and he's buried in Frewsburg, New York. And that was the kind of the sum total of knowledge of Robert H. Jackson. And that included lawyers, and it included myself. As interested in the history, I started to learn, and this is where we all have this curiosity, and that's why, frankly, I applaud all the Rotarians and all the projects that you do here. I see it in our area, and I see it here today in what President, as you were announcing your various programs, you have this intellectual curiosity. You have your reason to do well and serve well, and I applaud that. And that curiosity, perhaps in some strong way, got to me, because I knew in 1954, Robert Jackson died, and his funeral was held at St. Luke's Episcopalian Church. I learned that all 8 justices of the United States Supreme Court attended that funeral. That was the first and only time that has ever happened. They got on a train. They got on a train where security was incredibly high because, as Doug Neckers mentioned minutes ago, 1954 was also Brown versus Board of Education, a highly controversial time period. And they had to have guards all along the railroad. So anyway, so what I did was in the year 2000, paused and captured on film interviewing all the attorneys in Chautauqua County who were part of that funeral service, who had the opportunity to meet, subsequently dine with all 8 justices. This is Chief Justice Earl Warren, Hugo Black, Felix Frankfurter, William O. Douglas, among others, were all there. And it was a great project. That then spawned conversation in the community. That then spawned conversation with a couple of industrialists who, I never knew this until you asked. That's one of the things that you need to ask people. What is your curiosity? What is your interest? That one of the industrialists in town who I was interviewing for an unrelated project, I asked him, as an Italian-American, who was your hero in the 1930s? I would have bet the ranch. He would have said Joe DiMaggio. No, he said Robert Jackson. Why? Because he was a guy who led the largest criminal trial in history during the 20th century. Was a guy from Jamestown, New York, who pulled himself up by the bootstraps. He didn't, as I mentioned, go to college, didn't graduate from law school, and conducted on behalf of the United States. So he's telling me this in 2000. Then I led to a lady who was involved and who was a philanthropist, and I told the story of her friend. She goes, well, if that's important, great, I'd like to be involved. Next thing you know, there was a facility which is mentioned in this pamphlet, which was the Scottish Rite facility, 19,000 square feet. I didn't have a clue what we'd do with 1,000 square feet, but it was available. We rolled the dice. I actually put in an offer. We bought it. They each put up $500,000 to say, Greg, this idea, albeit totally, I had no plan, I had no program. You can't search and find Greg Peterson writing up a possible thesis as to how this would look. We just did it on conversation like today. And the next thing you know, they bought in. Next thing we bought a building. Next thing you know, we had programming there. Next thing you know, we had the biographer, Eugene Gerhardt. Next thing you know, we had all of the prosecutors who were with Robert Jackson there in 2001. Next thing you know, it was covered by C-SPAN. And all of a sudden, we were beating the drums. Next thing you know, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor showed up because she was wondering, what was this all about? The next thing you know, we had Chief Justice William Rehnquist dedicate the facility in 2003. Why? Because he was a clerk to Robert Jackson. And at a time when he was accepting absolutely no invitations, he decided that would be wonderful. It's important that it be in Jamestown, New York. He felt it was an economic engine to feel good about somebody who had, in fact, pulled himself up by the bootstraps, and he accepted. He came, 3,000 people showed up outside the Jackson Center. Unbelievable. Since that time, we've had Linda Brown of Brown versus Board of Education. We've had Fred Korematsu of the Korematsu case. The Barnett sisters for judges, West Virginia versus Barnett. We've tracked them down. We've had the law clerks who were involved in Brown versus Board 2, Youngstown Steel, all come to the Jackson Center. Why? To salute Jackson. They didn't come as gigs. I didn't pay them. They came because they felt something special. And what we found in our community, was all of a sudden, when Chief Justice Rehnquist shows up, when all of a sudden Nicholas Katzenbach shows up, Linda Brown shows up, Fred Korematsu shows up, it goes on, and James Meredith showed up. Why? Because Jackson's involvement in Brown versus Board of Education, its legacy has led to us having the Julian Bonds, the Andrew Youngs, come to Jamestown to salute what was started in 1954 with Brown versus Board of Education. And all of a sudden our community, and this is probably one of the messages that Dr. Neckers wanted me to at least pass along, is you never know. What started off as an idea, what started off as something where you were beating a drum on somebody who was local that nobody knew about, all of a sudden gained incredible credibility by having these individuals, these programs, get caught up, captured, and distributed. By the way, one of the things we've done, and we film everything. I'm glad you're filming this because they're going to be curious what I'm doing down here in Toledo. We film everything, and we use that public access. We put everything ultimately up on public access. So in our area, you may not have gone to the program. You may not have actually even known it was going on, but all of a sudden you're going to turn it on, 9 o'clock, Channel 19, Time Warner Cable, has it all the time. It's nonstop. Robert Jackson. And after 14 years, either they get tired of it, but they continue to watch it, but they know more about it. And now there's a sense of community pride. It has ultimately paused and said, gee, we got other community individuals who need to be celebrated. Lucille Ball, the National Comedy Hall of Fame, may soon be up in Jamestown, New York. I don't want to say directly resulted from what we've done, but it didn't hurt. At the same time, Roger Tory Peterson, if you're an ornithologist, he's from Jamestown, New York. These are exciting times in Jamestown, New York, which is in southern portion of New York State, and it's had its economic difficulties. We have empty storefronts. We've got brand new storefronts. It's a variety of things. But the Robert Jackson Center has become sort of a tool for feel-good, community pride. And the other interesting part, and I could not have guessed this because it's anticipating a question, the Jackson Center. Did you have any idea that you would have Chief Justice John Roberts show up 10 years after Chief Justice Rehnquist was there? The answer was no. Lucky to get one, let alone to have last year. We had Justice Kennedy, we had Justice Ginsburg, and we had Chief Justice Roberts, who came here and spoke on the 10th anniversary of our dedication. And you can watch that on C-SPAN or YouTube or wherever. And what we've done, we have taken something, and I commend this to Rotary because you have such an amazing array of speakers, is to have that which you film, digest it, and perhaps put it up on YouTube. We have on our YouTube site part of the communications, part of the opportunity to get the word out of Robert Jackson's legacy is to, in fact, tell people who's talked, show people who, other people who've talked about it. We have 3 million hits here at a Robert H. Jackson website and YouTube site. It's remarkable. It's all because we've had an opportunity to span the word. We also could not have guessed, frankly, that 6 of the last 9 justices, the most recent 6, during their confirmation hearings, had the question asked, who was your role model? Give us a little sense, a sneak preview of your jurisprudence. Who did they say? Robert H. Jackson. Robert H. Jackson. And inevitably, they ask why, the follow-up question. The power of the executive, that's Youngstown Steel. The power of civil liberties, that's Barnett case and Korematsu case. His ability to write so well. They have all found favor in Robert Jackson. They know more than perhaps we do at the Jackson Center. And part of our opportunity is, of course, to have come here to talk about him, to have the inspiration of saying, gee, I didn't know much about Robert Jackson. Now that you mention it, that's quite remarkable. Quite a remarkable resume of Robert Jackson, a guy who never went to college, never graduated from law school, and became that answer to the Jeopardy question. Similarly, I could not have ever guessed that as a result of international crimes which have occurred throughout the world, that in fact we would have all the activity that's going on in the Yugoslavia tribunals, the Rwandan tribunals, the Cambodia tribunals, the international criminal courts, all of which have been established various ways, either through the United Nations or treaties, all of which are premised upon the Nuremberg trial, of which this Jamestown native, Robert H. Jackson, was the chief prosecutor. But most important, and next year we're going to celebrate the 70th anniversary, is the fact that Robert Jackson, a guy, never went to college, never graduated from law school, became the lead negotiator of the London Agreement, which was the template upon which they would conduct the Nuremberg trial. He was the guy who negotiated with the Allies right after, as the war concluded, as opportunities presented itself. He was there on behalf of the United States with the Russians, the French, and the British. And when you look at the London Agreement, the treaty signed by those turned out to be 19 countries, the signator on behalf of the United States of America, authorized by President Harry Truman, was Robert H. Jackson. It's amazing. A guy from a very small city in Jamestown, New York, a real sense of pride. In fact, that London Agreement became the template upon which the 21 defendants, the bookend of World War II, which we are celebrating now and for the next couple of years, is the Nuremberg trial. The Nuremberg trial. And that is something that Robert Jackson was intimately involved in, not only in the London Agreement, locating the fact that it would be held in Nuremberg. It's a whole story unto itself. and in fact then became the chief prosecutor, had to in fact gather up the prosecuting team that would in fact be the ones that would lead to this first ever, made out of whole cloth, tribunal, which is what we use today, and in fact is the tribunal which, as Doug was talking about, this is an anniversary of what happened in Holland, and the head of that, the Reich Marshal of Holland over there was Arthur Seysencourt, and he was in fact prosecuted at the Nuremberg trial and convicted and ultimately hanged. It is exciting. It's exciting for me. It's exciting, frankly, to be here at Law Day. It's exciting to be able to talk to this august group, and I did check you guys out. It's pretty impressive, your group is. And it's not because Doug brought me here. It's the fact that you are thinkers, you are doers in your community. You do an awful lot. And one of the things in Jamestown that we've done is we've had this opportunity, incredible opportunity, to take this asset in the form of Robert H. Jackson, which our community knew very little about. I can tell you from experience. Today, 13 years later, and we're still kids. We're a work in progress. And if you have ideas, please feel free to stop up and give me, because I'm all ears. But it's an amazing story that's, again, exciting for me to tell. It's exciting for me to live. And it's exciting for me to be in front of you today.